All right, hey there. I'm going to do another Leetcode question. We're going to do an easy one in the algorithm space, and we'll be using Python. And I'm going to act as a tech interviewee candidate, and I'm unfortunately going to be using a Google Doc to do all of this, and I'll blink twice for help. But you don't want to get too used to using a VS Code or Sublime or Leetcode editor because you might not have access to that during an interview. And it kind of hides a lot of crutches that you might have. At least for me, I found that a lot of the autocomplete hides things I don't really understand. So I'm kind of doing this just to kind of get myself unrusty. It's been quite a while since I've done these, and just see how we're doing. So let's pick one. We've chosen a one that we haven't done before, an easy in the algorithm space, and let's see what we get. Oh, and I'll start a timer as well for this question. So we are in a mock interview. We'll probably have less than an hour, closer to half an hour, I'd say, with all the other questions and things like that to solve this problem. So we got number 2278, percentage of letter in string. Given a string, S, and a character letter, return the percentage of characters in S that equal letter rounded down to the nearest whole percent. Don't understand that just yet. Example 1, S is foobar, as is tradition, and letter is O, and the output's 33, so it's the 33. The percentage of characters in S that equal the letter O is 2 divided by 6, 100%, 33% when rounded down, so 33. Oh, okay. So we are taking a letter, finding the number of matches in the string, and compared to the length of the string as a whole, and converting that to a percentage out of 100 as an integer, and rounded down to return that. So for S, J, 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 K, it should be 0 because there's no K's in it. Okay, this seems relatively straightforward. I might have some questions for the interviewer, like what is the, first I'm copying it over into the Google Doc. This is kind of what we'd be seeing. And some of the questions that I have for the interviewer at this point. So let's say they've given us this question, has been about a minute or two. I'd ask some assumption questions. So first question I might have is, what about empty string? Still 0, I assume, because we're given a letter. What is the max length of string? Will it fit in memory? This is a kind of an interesting one for this problem. Maybe we'll get into that after. If it didn't fit into memory, we'd have to do some sort of streaming approach. So interviewer might say, for now, let's start with assuming it'll fit in memory. In fact, for this question, they give us the constraint of a max of 100 characters. So we actually get there's some stuff that we might be able to do there as well. Another question I have is, are the inputs always valid? Are we getting alphanumeric or just lowercase alphabetic? Does it matter? Because technically it might not matter because we're just doing comparisons to the input letter. So let's say they told us will be ASCII. So it could be numbers, letters, could be specific characters within that ASCII. Could also be UTF-8, well, let's just say that's not exactly relevant here. In fact, they say that it's just going to be lowercase English letters, and the input letter is going to be 1 as well. So we're always going to be given a letter. We're always going to be S. This should be okay and enough to start. So let's think about approaches. I think for this one, we might only have one realistic approach. So algo 1, my suggestion here is we're going to keep counter of matches and iterate through characters in the string, and increment matches on match with a string character compare. And then at the end, take matches divided by the length of the string, and make sure we are doing that as, I guess actually integer would work here because it would truncate down to what we're going for the output. But regardless, we're going to do some sort of rounding operation. So there, with Python at least, we have a math.round function. And ask the interviewer if that's okay to use, which I think will be here, because implementing a math round down might not be the intent of this question. and just return that. And that gives us, that gives it in 0 to 1 range. We want to make sure that's in the 0 to 100 range. And it'll return 0 if there's no matches as expected. It'll return 100 if they were all matches. Those are kind of the edge cases I'm looking at here. And if there's no, if the length of the string is 0, this would fail. So we don't want to, we want to do a check, add a check for a 0 length string and return 0 directly. This would be kind of a O of n, where n is length, a number of chars. And I don't think we can do better than that, because we always have to check every single character, unless the string was pre-sorted or something along those lines. Then we might be able to do a log n to find the first point where the character is in the second point, so 2 and log n ops. But that is not the case here. Maybe their interviewer would ask us some questions about that afterwards. Let's see. So percentage of characters is that. Let's make sure this would work for a quick case. I'm going to ask the interviewer, like, is it all right if I go with this approach? I think this is close to optimal. They might, I'm going to assume this is a yes. Feel free to let me know if I'm missing anything. So let's start with thinking about the skeleton of the function. So let's do this in Python, and we'll call this count match percentage or something like that. And our input's going to be the word string, and the output is going to be a integer, this integer amount. So first we do a check, if not word, if it's basically a none or an empty string, return 0. That's our first check. And then we need to do keep count of matches, and we have, we're also taking in the letter. So we'll call that letter. And I'm not sure if Python has a char option. I would ask the interviewer if we need to do a check to make sure letter is a string or not. I'm just going to choose string instead of char for this one. I don't want to, I don't remember exactly whether char or char is a thing in Python. I'm sure it is, but we can look into that in a little bit. All right, so now we want to iterate through characters. And we don't actually need to keep track of the index of these characters. So I'm just going to, for char in Word, if char equals letter, increment matches. So we could turn this into kind of a inline function where we do something sort of like, so there's a function called sum that'll sum all the things inside of a list or iterator, and then we could do char equals letter for char in Word, and this generates a iterator essentially within this, and that replicates this this bit of code right here, but makes it a little bit cleaner. So let's try that, and then at the end. And this is the part that's O of n. And finally, we return the math.round. So assuming math is imported, we might have to do an import at the beginning. Of 100 times matches divided by the length of the word. And here, length of word is an O of 1 operation in Python. And we are only storing matches, char, so in terms of space, we are not using any extra space. It's all constant, so time is O of n, space is O of 1, and I think that's about as close to optimal as we can get. So let's do a quick check. Let's run through an example. So we're at about 8 minutes, 25 seconds. This is a fairly, I think this is a fairly simple problem. Let's see if we are missing anything once we try to run this in Leetcode, which is, we're going to call this equivalent to talking with the interviewer about this. So if we had a string, this empty string would return 0. If we had a string that had just one letter, let's just say k, and our input is k, what do? We are iterating through the list. We check for each character in Word whether k is equal to k, and it is, so that's a true. The sum of the trues, so Let's make sure Boolean arrays, when you sum them, they add as 1, and I believe that's true. We'll see that. We'll see whether that's the case in Python. I'm pretty sure Python automatically converts a Boolean array, and when you sum over it, the true values are added as 1s. And then so we have matches of 1, length of array is 1, so 1 to 1, 100% return, which should be correct. If this was like K3 even, then we'd have a 1 over 2 equals 50. So 1 over 2, let me just show it here. Matches would be 1, length of word would be 2. 100 divided by 2 is 50, and we return that rounded down. So actually, sorry, we're rounding down. We don't want to, this is why we're doing the check. Rounded down is not the same as math.round, so keep that in mind. We're actually doing a math.floor. We don't even need to use math at this point. We can truncate using the int function, which truncates to the floor, assuming this was not an integer at this point. Which I think in Python, when you divide an int by an int, it'll stay as an int. We might want to actually make sure that this turns into a float just for integer truncation issues. And then after that, it converts it back to an int. So let's try that. And just to make this a little bit cleaner, we'll do it this way. So when we multiply matches times 100 first, we don't even need to worry about turning it back into a float, because 100, it'll be a larger int that can divide by the length of the word. One thing we might need to watch out for here is if the length of the word is close to the limits of an integer size, when you times it by 100, you might overflow the integer. So I'd ask the interviewer, do we need to worry about flow? And since we know that the constraint here is length of 100, we don't have to worry about that. So for this case, no. Okay, I think this should be all right. Let's have a go at this. We're about 12 minutes in. I'd like to see if this works. So they call it percentage letter. Same string is S in this case. I should be allowed to change that to word, and letter stays the same. And we have our sum, character, letter, and words. Let's double check everything, make sure we have no tabs or anything like that. This is one of the issues with copying over from Google Doc. So if the word's not is empty or none, return 0. Otherwise, we sum all the characters where they're equal, and then we divide that by the length of the word after multiplying by 100. We truncate down with the int function and return that as an int. Okay, let's try it. Word, letter, letter. Okay, seems good for the 2 test cases. Let's try it as a submission. Okay, seems to run just fine. Let's clean out some of these extra comments and count matching letters. And yeah, not much to say here. I think this is a fairly straightforward question without too many twists and turns. Don't worry about speed here. This is not relevant. Again, for problems as simple as this, usually the speed is unrelated to the algorithm itself, and it's something to do with the backend. Yeah, okay, so some of the things, at this point we're at 13 minutes in. Maybe if you're doing an entry level and you're just really killing it, the interviewer might start asking some more questions just to get a sense of how much more you might know. Some of the things they might ask is like, what happens if the length of the string is much larger? Extensions, let's just call this. What if string bigger than memory? Or what if it's infinite or streaming? Like you're getting a stream of characters coming in, and you don't exactly know when it'll end. It might be infinite. So these are where you might actually create some sort of generator or a function that basically keeps a state of the current count of matches as well as the current length of a word. And I'm not going to write the full code here, but you might have some sort of like class matcher percentage. And it has a function in there that's add or push add char, let's just call that, and then it'll be a char, and we have our init, and I'm not doing real code here, but we have the letter we're trying to match to. We have and then so self.letter is equal to letter, and now here every time you add a char, we also start our initial matches equals 0, and self dot total count is equal to 0. So every time you add a char, count +1, and then self dot matches equals let's see, or +1 if char equals self dot letter, else 0. So basically we're keeping this sequence going. Every time you add a character, it's doing this, and then you could do get current percentage, and there'll be like selfs and things like that. Here we're not worrying about that right now, and return the int of 100 times self.matches divided by self.count. And this is kind of a way you could imagine someone has this matcher class that they're passing in through, like, say, a web interface or something like that, and we started with the letter K, you know, and then every so often we just add char, like K, and then we can do a m.get current percentage. And sorry about all the mixing of underscores and camel case, but try to keep this the same if you're actually doing this. Let's clean this up a little bit. Depending on which language you use, there might be different, or not even just which language, but also which company you join. They might have different traditions for these sort of things. But here's one way you could kind of approach something like this, where it's infinite streaming. The nice thing about something like this is you're only storing a constant amount of space, and the time complexity has become O of 1 for the inputs char. You could pass in multiple characters at the same time, you know, def add string, and then, you know, you basically for char in string self.add char. There's other ways you could do this, but this is one approach you might try, and this is relatively easy to extend. This is the sort of thing where maybe the interviewer wants to slightly probe you and get a little bit more information. They might ask you about that. There are some other questions they might ask. What if you have nuns inside of the string, and so on and so forth. But I think for the purpose of this question, I hope this was helpful and kind of gets you on the right track. I think this was a relatively straightforward question, but still does a good job of making sure the candidate can explain big O and basic concepts and string comparisons, iterating through strings, not storing extra information like creating a whole new word and stuff like that, which would be pretty inefficient and break for bigger things. And there's always opportunities to make it longer and so on. So hope this was interesting to you guys, and have a good day.